Welcome to my Action Research virtual PowerPoint presentation. My name is Alexandra Marcus, and for the next few minutes I will be explaining my research proposal. Let's begin with stating the problem. I am concerned that grade 8 students do not see the value of learning French. They see it only as a grade that shows on their report card, and that they are learning it in an environment where they feel unsafe to make mistakes. Therefore, they are not interested or motivated to learn it. This problem is important because French is a language used all around the world and opens the doors to many opportunities, such as traveling and job. Generally, those who know a second language or more enjoy many benefits mentally and socially. Therefore, I will be researching the question, how can I motivate grade 8 students to learn French? First, let's define some central and relevant terms. Value, or value of French, the importance of knowing the French language. Motivate. This means to stimulate someone's interest in or enthusiasm for doing something. Inclusion. Feeling valued, respected, and a sense of belonging in a group. Risks, or risks in the classroom. These are attempts and tries at new learning. French. French is an official language of Canada and a language used widely in the world. Engagement. This is interest and effort students put into their work. Socially safe classroom. This is a learning environment where students feel that it is acceptable to make mistakes and learn from their peers. In order to guide my research question, I conducted a literature review of the following 3 resources. The first one is a chapter entitled Motivation, Anxiety, and Emotion in Second Language Acquisition. In this chapter, the author examines how motivation, anxiety, and emotion play a role in second language acquisition. He reviewed the 4 elements of motivation that must be present for a student to be considered motivated. They are a goal, desire to achieve the goal, positive attitudes, and effort. The author also reviewed the influence of the social-cultural milieu on both cognitive and affective individual differences among language learners. He states that affective variables include attitude and motivation, language anxiety, and self-confidence. As well in this chapter, the author explains a major variable in the learning situation, that is, integrativeness, which begins with the cultural beliefs in the socio-cultural milieu, reflects the individual's level of interest in social interaction with the target language group, and attitudes towards the learning situation. While this research does not focus on specifically French as a second language, the implications of the theories provided can be used to support my question. In my second resource, it was a journal article entitled Affect Trumps Age, a Person in Context Relational View of Age and Motivation. In this article, the authors researched the impact of age and motivation on learning a second language. One of the major conclusions reached was a lack of belief in the efficacy of in-school learning environments and a relationship between not liking the teacher and not liking the subject. The conditions of the social environment can generate forms of motivation that are less internalized and more regulated by environmental influences and pressures. The article also found that if teachers do not have any personal experience with the culture, teachings will be focused on preparing students for local and national exams rather than the enjoyment of learning a language. This research was conducted in Switzerland, where students were learning English as a second language. The findings are still relevant to motivating students in learning French as a second language because the ideal social environment is the same for any second language acquisition. One group of students in this research had grown up learning English, and the other group had recently begun to learn English. The group of students who had grown up learning English are of particular interest to my research because students at the grade 8 level will have had many years learning French in the classroom. Therefore, I need to establish a positive relationship with them and make them believe in the efficacy of the in-school learning environment. The third resource I reviewed is a journal article entitled The Classroom Social Environment and Changes in Adolescence, Motivation and Engagement During Middle School. The authors of this article researched the impacts of the classroom social environment on changing levels of motivation and engagement among adolescents. This was a longitudinal study beginning with students in grade 5 and following them for 4 years, thus capturing insight from students who are of the same age in my research question. Students answered surveys about their perceptions of school, social interactions with peers during academic tasks, mutual respect among classmates, and competition and comparison among students around academic tasks. Students also answered surveys about their motivation, academic efficacy, social efficacy with the teacher, and social efficacy with peers. Although this study was conducted with students about math class, I found that students share similar feelings towards math and French. The implications of the research also support my question of motivating students. The researchers found that student perceptions of teacher support and the teacher promoting interaction and mutual respect were related to positive changes in their motivation and engagement. The social environment of the classroom, they found, is likely to be important in motivating students. If students perceive they are in a classroom where their ideas are respected with minimal threat of being embarrassed, students' confidence in their ability to learn skyrockets. In reviewing the three resources, I learned that there are two major variables at play in the grade 8 French classroom. The first one is the social environment of the classroom. The social environment of the classroom affects student confidence, self-esteem, and motivation. As mentioned in one of the articles, students need to feel unthreatened of being ridiculed by their peers in order to put in any effort. Effort, interestingly, is one of the 4 elements that make up student motivation, along with a goal, a desire to achieve the goal, and positive attitudes. In order to make the social environment a positive one for students, the teacher must teach students to interact respectfully with one another, which will raise the student confidence, self-esteem, and act as motivation. The second variable is the belief of efficacy of the in-school learning environment. Students need to believe that what they are learning is authentic and useful outside the environment in which they learn it, that is, the classroom. The attitudes around the learning have a great influence on student motivation. As seen in many Ontario classrooms, French is a subject students only have to take until grade 9, and then they are done with it. This made me wonder if students have this view because of the style of learning that is happening in the classroom. Are students learning only to use the content in the next grade? It is clear that students need to be motivated to learn, especially at the adolescent age, when learning, or school rather, is deemed uncool. By establishing a positive rapport with students and teaching them to collaborate respectfully with one another, teachers can inspire students to want to learn. Therefore, I have refined my research question to be, what are the impacts of a socially safe classroom on grade 8 students learning French? So let's begin with a research action plan. I have chosen to use checklists, student self-assessments, which is 2 stars and 1 wish, and a monthly survey. This will allow me to collect data from students as well as interpret what students are doing based on criteria I lay out for them. The checklists will be used to determine who is and who is not being inclusive. This will help me to determine if the classroom is socially safe. Student self-assessments will allow me to determine what students learned and what they are still wondering. This will help me determine the impacts on student learning. A monthly survey will assess the level of social safety in the classroom. Checklists on who is and who is not being inclusive. These will ensure validity because they will ensure there is a socially safe classroom throughout the research. These checklists will ensure consistency of a socially safe classroom. The researcher will fill in the checklists of behaviors observed. And as you can see, the checklists will count as conversation and observation. Surveys on student perceptions of social safety in the classroom. These surveys will also ensure the research is valid by getting the opinions of the students in the learning environment on which this research has direct impact. In this case, they are active agents in their own learning. Self-assessments, 2 stars and 1 wish. Student self-assessments will determine the impact of a socially safe classroom on student learning. If the checklists and surveys show that there is not a socially safe classroom, however, the data collected from self-assessments will be invalid. As the core French teacher and researcher, I will collect the data for my research. I will be collecting it during French class time in the homeroom. For these reasons, the grade 8 students will be involved in providing me with the data, and the grade 8 homeroom teacher will inform me before French class if there were any issues or concerns that could affect the validity of my results. For example, if student A is upset with student B because of a disagreement they had earlier. Parents will also be involved by providing consent for their children's participation in the research. I will have parents fill in a waiver explaining the purpose of the research and the terms of privacy and confidentiality. Participation in this research is entirely voluntary. For students whose consent to participate is not given, I will still have them complete the same tasks, the self-assessments, surveys, but I will exclude this data from my results. For students giving their opinion in the surveys and self-assessments, they will be randomly assigned a number so that I will not know which student is which number, but will allow me to ensure all students have provided me with their opinion. These data sources will be entirely confidential. With the checklist, I will record how many students are exhibiting which of the inclusive behaviors we have discussed. In this way, privacy and confidentiality will be maintained. The checklists, however, with the checklists, I will know the students. In presenting my research, all student names and any possible identifiers will not be used. Surveys and self-assessments will be done electronically. That way, handwriting cannot be matched to another work produced by students. These will be password protected in a password protected account. Checklists will be kept in my office in a locked cabinet. Checklists on the number of students exhibiting inclusive behaviors. This will occur weekly from October to March. In September will be used to build a socially safe classroom and ensure students know what the inclusive behaviors are and how they can exhibit them. Student self-assessment, 2 stars and 1 wish. These will be done daily from October to March. Surveys on students' perceptions of level of social safety in the classroom. These will be done monthly from October to March. Checklists on the number of students exhibiting inclusive behaviors. For example, listening to group members, speaking, letting everyone have a say. These checklists will be conducted weekly as mentioned, and the numbers will be compiled into a graph to show the trend or lack thereof of the number of behaviors being exhibited throughout the duration of the research. 2 stars and 1 wish. The 1 wish will be dedicated to ask students how they were inclusive. 1 star will be dedicated to ask how students they were inclusive. Once student self-assessments are completed, the results of the student responses will be compiled in a Google spreadsheet with items and responses. Based on student responses, themes will be determined and descriptive statistics will be used in the form of frequencies and percentages to describe the results, and bar graphs will be used to illustrate the findings. Surveys on student perceptions of the level of social safety in the classroom. Once the surveys are completed, students' levels of perceptions will be recorded in a Google spreadsheet with items and responses. Based on student responses, descriptive statistics will be used in the form of frequencies and percentages to describe the results, and a line graph will be used to illustrate the findings. This study will support my own teaching practice because it will inform me about the impacts of an inclusive and socially safe classroom. It will deepen my pedagogical knowledge about how to create and implement an inclusive classroom. As well, I am hoping to know students better and in a more wholesome light, which I can use to better guide my instruction in the second semester after I have conducted research. I am also hoping to see which elements of the findings from this research can be applied to a more universal context, such as other classes or the entire school. The following are the references I used. Thank you for listening to my action research plan. Please feel free to share your questions and thoughts about it in the comments section below.